Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back. My name is Subrata Roy. Today I'm going to talk about uh, one of the most discussed uh, in within the enterprise architecture world, which is the governance. I think everywhere, whatever you know organization structure, whichever organization it is, in the especially in the IT field or in the business field, the governance is very important. And these days, when there's a lot of things are which are happening if I look at the whole enterprise architecture landscape, being it a target architecture, being it a implementation, being it a architecture practice, being it a whatever target architecture has been envisaged, and during the implementations, what is the value realization happen. So each and everything's are needs to be as part of the governance. I mean, that's what the enterprise architecture governance is important. So so the governance expression actually or ensures that the architecture being developed is done to the right level of detail, that the stakeholder is confident that the expected value will be delivered. So that is what expectation, and that is what governance authorities or governance can do. But definitely it's not something which will actually kind of coming with any sort of bureaucracy layer. It is not like that, but it will give you all sort of right direction, that whenever there is a target architecture is defined, there is a architecture practice in place, there is a you need to think about the value relations, you have to think of the implementations. So to this kind of expression we need to address. That's where you need to governance will come and will focus on the purpose of which is target that is being created, the compliance with the existing superior architecture, if there is approval for the new target is required or not. So I think for that initiatives, kind of things, the governance is very important, so that the stakeholder is confident and the expected value what has been assessed is delivered. Although there is always a more architecture work to be done, then there will be a time, money, and resources to include. But it is important that architecture completed is focused and provides value, and that's what the governor should always be cluster clear on the purpose of the architecture being developed. So I think I mean that's what I thought. Let's have that enterprise architecture governance, and how do you want to set up, what are the stages, what are the phases, what needs to be done, and all those things. So before that, just a small introduction about me. Yeah, so my name is Subrata Roy. I've been part of uh, in the IT industry for the last over 15 years now. I've been working as IT and enterprise architects, strategist. I've successfully defined and executed some of C-suite level initiatives, and have worked across industry verticals such as banking, insurance, mortgage, retail industries, tech, and then technology services also. And my specialty, I've been in the leadership positions for last few years, and enterprise architecture strategy, the IT transformation, the cloud, the multi-cloud, DevOps, the API-led integration, the application modernizations, microservice. Those are my some of the specialties. Yeah. So of late, definitely system design is also one of the things which I love. But before system design, I think enterprise architecture is some of the things which is very important. I love that subject. So yeah, thanks. That's a small introduction about me. Let's move to the as we talked about the enterprise architecture, the governance and all. But think about before we are jumping into the governance part. But then we need to have to kind of think that what is that enterprise architecture? I mean, there is a lot of frameworks which are available, right? There is a Toga, there is a Jackman's, and there is a multiples, right? Even Dodaps and all those things are. But what is that? What does that EA mean, right? I mean, that I find a lot of my client in initial discussion, I think there is some kind of expectation from a enterprise architecture. So I just based on my experience, some of the things I have listed, like what does it mean, right? Somebody can talk about, okay, uh, expectation is EA will come, develop technology standards. It may be at the infrastructure level, it may be uh, at a applications levels, at a programming language level. So some there should be some standards, and because there is a emerging technology which is coming, and that also require a a lot of standards needs to be followed, so that there is no slip around. So and then we can think about, okay, enterprise architecture, okay, will come and design some of the organizations within the IT, there is strategic roles and responsibilities. So that's what. And then there is a blueprints. Okay, I had to have EA blueprints, bring it to business, bring it to application technologies. Process, yes, business process is important. The governance, as I talked about, somebody, one of the listed down is, okay, expectation from the EA is the governance. Okay, how do I govern so that my stakeholder is confident that I'll be, implementation or IT large transformation perspective, it will be giving me the uh, you know d- value which has been expected from that transformation. So that's the governance part. Then a lot of things sometimes it is, hey, there is a architecture diagrams, right? It is a system level diagram, design level diagram. So there's a lot of diagrams which are there, or at a business capability level. So, and the method part is the application architecture part is sometimes a discipline, um, business processes, middle layer, technology stuff. So those are some of the things I have listed out. But if I look at these are all actually depends on the different context, right? So when you walk the talk with different people within your client or within the organization, these are the some things kind of which I have listed around, right? Now, you know, from a industry perspective, right? Some of the how that Gartner is talking about, hey, what is enterprise architecture? How the Jackman is talking about, how the Giga is talking about. So let's see that I'm just reading out this. It is talking about Gartner is saying that enterprise architecture is a holistic expression of an organization key business information, application, technology strategies, and their impact on business function and processes. The approach looks at the business processes, the structure of the organization, what type of technology used to conduct these business processes. That's what Gartner is saying from a enterprise architecture, what it is. And then what is the second? The Jackman is saying the enterprise architecture is a logical structure of classifying and organizing the descriptive representation of enterprise that are significant to the management of the enterprise as well as the development of the enterprise systems. So, in addition to what, how, and where, a complete description would necessarily have to include to remain the primitive interrogatives. So, who, when, and why. And then the last which I got the research is that there is a one more definition. So I got the enterprise architecture defines the vision, principles, standards that guide the purchase and deployment of technology within an organization. So I think whatever we spoke about, all these are pointed as are based on the context it has been listed out. I think why it is important because to understand the before you jumping into the how do you have that governance in the enterprise architecture world or enterprise architecture governance, you need to understand that what is that enterprise architecture means in a different context so that you can, okay, from a process aspect you can talk about governance, from a blueprinting aspect you can talk about governance. So that's the why I have talked about this, what is enterprise architecture. Now let's look at another important components from a again from an enterprise architecture. We understand we looked into the earlier slide the you know some of the standard listed, right, when you walk the talk with the different clients or different my peer groups, and also the some of the industry perspective, the definitions, right, what they talked about Gartner, so but here if I see, I'm just narrowed down and I look at the two major components, right. One is that EA management and one is that enterprise architecture components, right. I think before jumping into look into the EA management, let's look at the EA components. What are the first thing come out, right? It actually refers, to the architecture itself and includes things like applications, your software, your hardware, database, and deliverable produced to depict the architecture of an enterprise. Now, below the whatever list is given, it's a non-comprehensive. It is not, it would be more than that. So first of all, the there is a reference architecture. So reference architecture means it again means in a lot of things for so it's like suppose in a banking, right, or insurance or any mm, other industry, manufacturing, or maybe from pharmaceutical industry also. So first thing is the first you have to look at some of the reference industry architecture standards, right? Suppose a banking, the BN is you can refer from a reference architecture aspect, and then there is an architecture blueprint, right, where it consists of how this application integration view technology blueprint, how one applications will talk with each other. So all those things are part of the application blueprint. uh, Definitely technology standard is important, like being it a uh, emerging technologies, being it which are suitable for your organization, which are already there, some standards you have to define. So and then the architecture roadmap, you define, right, based on your reference and architecture, where you based on that, where your application landscape is light, and if there is a gaps, if there is a blueprinting, or some initiative will comes, and then you develop a architecture roadmap, right. So that's typically the EA components is all about, right. Now when you talk about the EA components, now something is that these component has to manage, right. So now that is why it is coming under the EA management, right? EA management or EA functions, right? So it refers to the EA group. There is a core group. It may be coming with a lot of things, right? It portfolio level, it may be solution architecture level, it may be governance levels, and then so on, right? So that's EA groups, right? Then each and every groups that there will be a stakeholder. There is a few roles and responsibility within that group, that function, and then the EA function is nothing but suppose all those things, right? You have a business architecture, you have a IT strategy, you have a application architecture, so all those comings under that EA functions and the EA governance process. So just to tell the think about enterprise architecture, not from a definition perspective. Think about enterprise architecture from a component wise, or two defined the two pillars you can think. One is your EA components, like you have a reference architecture, you have a blueprints, you have roadmaps and etc. And how do you manage this, right? And there will be some organizations, roles and responsibility, the functions and the governance process, right? So that's where reason why to talk about this is that when you are thinking about the governance also, e-governance, and these are important. These will be relative items, right? And governance is nothing but it's just a simple. You have to look at from a life cycle aspect. You have to look out from a stage one to stage two. So each and every steps or stages or phases you have to look at from a governance, right? Being it a strategic, being it a implementation, being it post implementation, how do you so yeah. So coming to the next is again uh, just to give an overview, how do you scope that, how you position your EA management. So I think if you look at these are more business and IT strategy perspective. There also your EA management will come into the pictures. Then if you look at the core enterprise architecture, which is ongoing, happening, each and every perspective, right? Your future environment, like a blueprint, business blueprint, information blueprint, technology blueprint. You have a guiding principles which regular needs to be updated, right? Being it a information, application, technology, or business. And then it just took the first started the assessment your current where you are currently existing current being in terms of your architecture, in terms of processes, in terms of your organization, competency, and cultures, and then the future, what is that? So these are all, so here also EA management is important. EA management will come and play important. Then all those things, definitely come with some strategic roadmaps, whatever we spoke about earlier. So that's what the EA management, you can positions. And then the again, from a scope and boundaries aspect, it may happen that enterprise, if I look at enterprise, the terms, there will be global, there is a, it may be cross geographies, there is a, business units or line of business and shared function of business IT. So, yeah, so if you look at the term as enterprise, this will include, and the term architecture would include what it is, your business architecture, your application architecture, your information architecture, technology architecture, security architecture. So this is what, right? So applications may, as a liquid, then it may be a global perspective, global scope. It may be across geographies. It may be, some of the business unit which are having particular applications. Maybe line of business. Even it may be, within this, shared function or IT. So I think that's the boundaries from an enterprise architecture management perspective, EA management perspective, and the components wise enterprise architecture component which you talked about, right? All your architecture like business applications, um, information architecture, technology. What are the scopes like from a business perspective? It is like you need to come a flow of individual business process. From an enterprise application perspective, what are the integration points among applications? You define that landscape, application landscape, and there is maybe 400, 500 applications. So in the is there an integration points? And then enterprise information access, where does the master data flow throughout the enterprise landscape, right? That's important thing. And then enterprise technology aspect of what is the technology architecture, where if you think about, hey, I need to do a DR, I need to do high availability environment. So that's some from a technology uh, architecture perspective. And the security, which is a very much important, what are the roles of the segregation and duties of controls, because everywhere you need to, when there is a e-com, all those things, especially in IT landscape, it needs to be, there needs to be controls and policy and compliance from a security aspect. So that's a uh, enterprise architecture component scope, and the EM positioning of EM management and its boundaries, scope and boundaries. Now, while I started with that, right, in with respect to the governance, right? E-governance. I said, it's a governance. It's a expressions to ensure that the architecture being developed is done to the right level of details, and so that the stakeholder is confident that the expected value will be delivered. Right now, while saying in the one liner that what is that business will get the benefits, right? I mean, I say that okay, it will deliver. So this is what more clarity will bring while there is a enterprise architecture governance. It will bring on with respect to ownership, with respect to decision making, with respect to your architecture asset management, and improve cross initiative collaboration and efficiency. That's a biggest benefits with respect to enterprise architecture. Then there is other thing which has been listed out, like you have a clear ownership and accountability, you have a enterprise based decision makings, you have improved integrations, you have improved architecture assets, you have solution building blocks, which is a very important, which talk about in governance process. It will actually promote the development of reusable components, which is a very important, right? You when you're doing that solutioning, right? That's what one of the key governance is coming, right? Is there any reusable things which are available? Can you reuse that, right? And the architecture building blocks, design patterns, technology stacks, frameworks, which shorten your solution development time, improve quality, interoperability, right? And then improve collaboration, use of solution architecture reviews, architecture working groups, and other cross-functional architecture reviews bodies leads to a improved sharing of best practices. If there is issues, if there is any challenges, how they within that working groups has mitigate those challenges, the similar things are coming, those will be shared. And that's what reusable components and other architecture across the program potentially enterprise wide. So things like that will help from a governance aspect, improve collaboration scenario. Now, and then the efficiencies, which is the last thing, the formal and documented process with a predefined template. There will be a lot of templates. I'll show you the template and later, right? Some of the templates which can be used from your organization or client perspective, right? So and then again from a if you look at some of the practices, some of the best framework like TOGAF and all, there's a lot of templates which are available, which can be very much used. So I think from efficiency aspect, you need to that documented process with the predefined template, standard practice that are consistently applied across the enterprise reduces inefficiency, costly late phase issue identification. I think so. That's the overall enterprise architecture governance business benefit. Now, when you say that, I mean, we talked about the what is that e-governance, what what are things, right? From enterprise architecture point of view, what are the listed when somebody is asking that, hey, what is enterprise? What are the things they listed down? What are the EA components? What are the EA management? And then the benefits of EA governance. And now, if you want to roll out, right, from a EA governance, if you want to set that up if you're in an organization, what are the things, right? So that's what this I'm going to talk about right now. So one thing is that it should be a phased manner, and that phase is two phase. First it you know first will be the iterative. So definitely there might be some standards, some templates which will be designed as a part of the first phase, and each and every time you discuss with the respective stakeholders, or or interviewing with your outside or the partners and all, so there will be a opportunity of improvement. That's what it is feedback. That's what it is iterative. And then second phase will be more of a expand to whatever things has been already layout as a part of the first phase. If there's opportunity to expand, you know to migrate to the your older audience, and the as well as the stability, right? So that's the core thing from a when you are thinking about the EA governance rollout approach. And then the iterative, which I talked about, a core guiding principle will be understand that is an organizational changes process, blending team tasks with enterprise stewardship roles, with team tasks with direct agencies facing system deliverables. So this will require iterative updates to process template artifacts based on the continuous feedback. Informational meetings. Ongoing enterprise architecture information meetings are planned as needed to increase overall awareness. These will be partly delivered by the your training team and partly delivered by your governance team. They'll be both in 1:1 format and group format. The communication matrix is very important when you are planning to roll out your governance, because it makes the awareness generation information meetings apart from your informational meetings, that a detailed communication matrix will be provided and executed at a key milestone in the rollout, reinforce the messaging understanding of EA at your organization or at your client. So I mean, this is overall the rollout when you are planning for a EA governance. Yeah, so coming to again the communication part and communication approach, right? So I think effective communication from EA governance is very important. So it is very critical. If you are really wanted to see some success in terms of implementation of enterprise architecture governance, especially for your client or your organization at a very initiative level, right, where awareness is generally low. So to make it a more successful, it depends on adoption. It depends on the ownership of new, governance framework and process. And the enterprise architecture communication will build awareness and commit to the change by what is that? To develop a consistent messaging that aligns enterprise architecture with the broader your organizations or your client program vision, leveraging multiple communication channels to ensure maximum exposure to the change. There might be organization, a lot of some of the organization already have a, communication programs. You can leverage those channels also, tailoring the contents and timing of message to provide appropriate information to individuals and groups, communicating the impacts of the change and including of the benefits of adopting the new structure and process. Clearly define the EA governance structure and process, include the new roles as fully outlined in the structure, providing key, I think, from your organization or client perspective, and if there is a partner or agency. So I think so that's what you need to provide in your key stakeholder, key client or key from your organization or agency stakeholder with the knowledge of the tools, knowledge and tools required to perform the new roles and responsibility, and sustaining the change by providing ongoing message to the stakeholder, including implementation updates, enterprise architecture. I think that's a from a governance communication approach, which is very critical to while you're thinking about the implementation of architecture, enterprise architecture governance. Now, this is very straightforward. I think just to give you that, how does the evaluation happen or from a enterprise architecture governance perspective. So I think if you look at the first, it is it is started with EA standards and policy transition. Then it is EA asset development management, EA asset used for solution architecture review. Then high impact initiative escalation paths through your either it is architecture review board or enterprise architecture board. Then critical architecture decision escalation path, the communication part, the feedback loops, all things are actually, important, and that's where it is, evaluating. It's a evolving enterprise architecture governance perspective. So I think architecture asset governance will include the representation from your organization or from your client, and a subset of your organizations or your client partners or agency responsible for building the core architecture. Then solution architecture reviews are also coupled with an application development release. So participant will include from your client or your organizations or and the agencies building the solutions or the partners who will be building the solutions. So that's a, from an evaluation of EA governance aspect. Now, while thinking about the you are trying to phase out, right? I said right, two phases of uh, rollout of enterprise architecture governance. Now, let's look at the method also, right? From an enterprise architecture governance perspective, right? So I think there's a three major, p- I would say the three major areas we need to look out from a governance method aspect. First thing is that, okay, when there is a new initiative, new things, and new so I'm just slightly talking about in terms of when you already set up EA governance, right? So at that moment, what needs to be done, right? So you have a planning stage, you have a solution delivery, you have a operations, right? So at what level the EA governance things or EA governance methodology or approach needs to be. So first thing is that from a planning aspect, the initiative, right? Initiative getting. So that's where the EA governance will come into picture and play important role. So as a part of the initiative get review, you think about there is a demand comes and then that's what the demand planning process will start, and this process support initiative architectural assessment, review to support alignment with the future state, blueprint, principles, policies, and standards. So this is the first things when you have a governance in place, and from a activity was from a method aspect how it can start, right? So initiating getting is first thing, and second is the solution architecture review, which is very important because that's where you are actually into the implementation stage. So you have to integrate with the delivery life cycle, and these process guides the application developments towards your organization or client, the future state, and provides the management structure and process to achieve this alignment. Then the architecture asset governance, which is very important. This process supports the decision making and definition, publishing the architecture assets, principal standard policies that guide your client or your organization, blueprint, and solution development. Now, I mean, third thing, the asset, architecture asset, which is actually in generally consumed by the solution architecture uh, point of view only. So I'll show the letter on the how it is in a simplified view, who consumes and what, how they, at a different simplified view, how that, roles and responsibility look like. So think about from a enterprise architecture, method aspect, how it will work from a getting review initiative, the gettings initiative, solution architecture point of view, solution and architecture asset governance perspective. So just to get into the elaborations of first steps initiative getting review, I think it has a four important. One is that preliminary screening, business assessment, technical assessment, business scale validation. Uh, so that's the fourth thing. So overall, the if you look at that preliminary screening, it focuses. If you look at that's what I'm saying. It focuses on the review the initiative request, whatever initiative which is coming, or the inventory of the initiatives. There will be, would be a initial questions or clarification which has been asked at a preliminary stages, and then the filter out the initiative that are if there is it is a duplicative, if there is a redundant or do not align with the future state architecture, and then determine the level of business and technical impact assessment required in subsequent gate reviews. So few of the inputs which require for preliminary screenings are initiative request form, future state architecture blueprints, uh, and then outputs you can expect from the inventory of initiatives, preliminary screenings, who will be responsible, whoever is sponsoring these initiatives, then the business architect, the chief architect, and then the director of client, director of solutioning who will be, and there will be some other participating also, like EA core teams, technical architects, and then their operations and all team will also include. So I think preliminary screening, this is the one of the major thing. Now coming back to business assessment also, which is also important, right? Now business assessment, what has happened that it will help complete the initial mapping of initiative business outcomes, and then review the inventory of initiative summary and initiative request form, and understand the scope of the business impact, document the findings of in the business impact assessment. I think that's very important, and where necessary provide initiative architecture recommendation to the initiative sponsors. So that's the uh, objectives of business assessment. I think one of the most important outcome of the business assessment is the business impact assessment, right? And the architecture recommendation of business assessment intelligence. Then third is the technical assessment. So what the objective is this technical assessment? We are still at a initiative, getting review. So these are four areas or distinct phases, right? Screening, business assessment, technical assessment, business case. So coming to the technical assessment, so what the objective is technical assessment? It will address the inventory of initiative summary and determine the architecture impact assessment, document the findings of the technical and security assessment, where necessary provide the initial architecture recommendation to the sponsors, and then create a rough order of magnitude estimate of the initiatives, right? That's what I mean from since that there is a demand, and there will be rough order of effort estimations will be created over here, and then followed by the identify the any risk of the initiative may pose in the architecture, and then also the existing technical estimate to identify reuse opportunity among prior assessment. So this is what the technical assessment will objectives will look like, and then the business case validation, uh, which is one of the last phase of initial gate review, which provides you economic justification for each proposed initiative within the program, validate the business case benefits and ROI findings, and document business case review findings and recommended updates. So I think from initiate getting review aspect, these are four important areas. I didn't talk about all those, purpose from ancient gatives. You all know what is all about, and then I just tried to explain what needs to be done from what are the objectives from preliminary screening, business assessment, technical assessment, and business critical validation perspective. Now, important thing is while you're doing that initiative gate review, what are the roles and responsibilities? These are again illustrative, is based on my experience. This is nothing related to any of my organization which where I have worked or I am working right now. So it is completely based on my experience, the views. I mean, it doesn't require if I say the director of solution, director of operation, you may say that manager of solution, manager of operation. That is based on your agreement and requirement from your clients based on the scope, right? So but then this is again illustrative issue. So I think from a position, title, roles and responsibility, I mean these are the potential participants will be from a review teams, and then there'll be an as and when required representation, like you might be having your agency or a partner representative, you might have require solution architecture, the initiative lead, the EA core teams, and the security architect. So what the responsibility here would be? Definitely they validate the business value, operation effectiveness of benefit, approve the prioritized initiative, review and agree roadmap changes, review and approves the implication of changes to the capital and expense plans, assess the impact of the future state architecture, notifies agency initiative requester of outcomes of each gating review steps, and identify initial architecture review need based on the initiative scope, size, anticipated architecture impact. So I think this is overall the initiative gating review. It has a four distinct area or phases, and the you know from a roles and responsibility, who will be the participant. These are all illustrative view. Now coming back to the next thing, right? From a governance, e-governance method aspect, right? First step, you have looked into the initiative um, that initiative gettings at a planning stage, from the planning stage. Now it comes to the once that everything is fine, then it comes to the from your solution and delivery perspective, solution architecture review perspective, right? So what are the context? It has also a five stages or five areas or five phases. The context here is you have to solution your solution architecture which needs to be aligned with your program governance, application development, with the architectural assurance process by ensuring compliance with the architecture standards, reference architecture guidelines, which is a part of your EA asset, right? Now coming to the next is, as I say, that solution architecture uh, review also has five distinct areas or five phases, right? Now What are the things, right? When you say that, first thing, engage solution architecture review, right? What are the objectives? I think first objective is to understand the solution scope uh, and the requirements to determine the levels of solution architecture review required. Review initiative request form, which has been as a part of the first initiative gate. Initiative definition, integrated release plan. Consult the designated solution architect to discuss the initiative and plan for the upcoming solution architecture review initiative. Utilize the solution architecture review plan guidelines criteria to determine the solution architecture review level required. Solution architecture review manager assign resources to the solution architecture review teams and confirm solution architecture availability. Create the initial solution architecture review summary report with the resource names and dates and updates the integrated release plan with the solution architecture review milestones. So that is the first, first steps objectives, the engage solution architecture review. Now coming to the plan solution architecture, what are the objectives, right? One is that you have to communicate prescribed material from the initiative, team documentation, and initiative gate review. Convene the solution architecture review teams and ensure the solution architecture review team understands the responsibility and initiative milestones. Identify decisions, issues, risk, what the solution architecture poses with the broader enterprise through analysis of the initiative documentation, which will be reflected to the solution architecture review summary report. Create the solution architecture review EA assets, plan to the list of EA assets for the solution architecture during the delivery lifecycle. Ensure that EA assets, the principal standards, roadmap, blueprints, framework, etc., are used to the solution or guidelines. Adjust the integrated release plan as necessary if at all required. Update the solution architecture review summary report to include outcomes, the plan solution architecture review activity. So I think from a solution architecture review perspective, but the output is expected as a part of the second stage is solution architecture review plan, solution architecture review summary report, integrated release plans, and who will be responsible? Definitely solution architecture. There might be a review manager, there might be a review team, there will be solution architecture, and then there will be a lot of other participants also, like your technology architect, your business architect, your security architect, your chief architect also will be participating. Now, third is the most important thing, the analyze solution architecture review. Now, what the objective it will get, right? There is a multiple objectives. One of the objective is review the solution architecture against the functional requirement, right? Which has been developed by solution delivery teams are used to design for the application, right? Design the application. Now communicate prescribed materials from the initiative team documentation like the solution architecture. Review responses to decision issues and risk raised in the plan solution architecture review. Identify architecture issues, risks that point to action either to create a issue risks or update standards, change the date on the integrated release plans, etc., which will be reflected on the solution architecture review summary report. Check alignment of the solution application prescribed EA assets, which is very important. Then update the solution architecture review summary to include outcomes of the analysis of the solution. So I think this is from a third solution architecture analysis of solution architecture review point of view, but I expect output is expected like again the summary report, the solution architecture review, asset review plan. Responsible would be solution architect manager team, solution architect, the business architects, initiative teams, technology architect will be additional participating for these stages, this phase. And coming back to design solution architecture review, so you did a engage solution architecture review, you did plan solution architecture, you did already analysis. Now you have to do the design part of it, right? So what's the objective here? One is communicate prescribed materials from the iterative, sorry, from the initiative team documentation. So communicate prescribed materials from the initiative team documentation. Review components to decision issues and risk raised in the analysis of this stage. Analysis of solution architecture review. Then identify design related architecture decision issues, risks which will be related to solution architecture review summary report. Check alignment of the solution and asset application of the prescribed EASS documented in the solution architecture review and EASS plan, and update the solution architecture review report to include outcomes of the design solution architecture review activity. Again, from a responsible, who will be responsible? Your solution architecture review manager, solution architecture team, review team, the solution architect, and then other additional participant will be the initiative team, technology, security, and chief architect. Now, fifth and most important, the last is the build solution architecture review. Now, here the most objective is it's a optional if it is required. Schedule as needed due to deviation from architecture issues and expectation, right? I mean, if there is a deviations from the architecture issue, then only this last thing is build solution architecture reviews required. Communicate prescribed materials from the initiative team documents. Review response to issues, risk raised in the design solution architecture review. Identify architecture issues, architecture risk, which will be reflected in the solution architecture review summary report. Check alignment of the solution assets, application of the prescribed VA asset document in the solution architecture review. Update solution architecture review summaries report to include outcomes of the build solution architecture review. So again, if you look at typical responsible, who is responsible for this? I think solution architect, review manager, solution architect, review teams, solution architect as the additional participating, the initiative teams, the technology architect, security architect, and the chief architect will be present. So these are from a solution architect review from the five stages or five, but this last may be the optional. See if at all there is some deviations is required. Now, who from a response reviews roles and responsibility aspect, right? As I said, there will be a solution architecture review team lead, solution architect team members. I know those are the positions, but again, this is illustratives. It may differ from organization to organization or from client to client. And definitely one of the from whenever solution is saying, there is a requirement for your need-based representation also from your agency or the partner representative, initiative manager, specialist, some of the areas like application, information, infrastructure. So now the responsibility wise, if I look at the participant, if we look at that solution architecture team review lead, like chief architect, solution architecture review manager, they will lead solution architecture review meetings to ensure solution architecture aligned with the ensure standard principles and etc. So I think, as I said, right, whatever my standard principles, roadmaps, or the EA assets, right? Main consumer is a solution architecture. At the time of solution architecture, it's mainly consumed. So this is what they at the time of solution architecture review meeting. This is what it has been consumed, right? Those standards have been referred as a part of your solutioning architecture review, right? And then from a initiative application architect's perspective, the ensure alignment of the solutioning architecture with the enterprise architecture, review and submit deliverables to solutioning architecture review and manager for review. And these are, specialist role, business architect, data architect. It is a pure domain architect related. So what they will do from a solution perspective, solutioning review, ensure the solution architecture and architecture requirements are adequately documented, ensure architecture alignment with the enterprise standard and principles and blueprint, etc. Provide architecture guidance, assist in escalation of architecture concerns, determine the architecture review status, document architecture review results, including status, issues, actions. And when it comes to the need-based, participate the initiative team members, if necessary, to provide input from the specific areas. So, suppose the banking, suppose the payment related, if there is any set of domains thing, any specific things you need inputs. So, I think that's where the initiative manager can come and team members can come and bring you necessary inputs. So, this is overall from a again from a enterprise architecture governance perspective. This is the second part of it. From a method aspect, we talked about first the initiative getting review. Then we talked about the second thing is the solution architecture review. Third is the architecture asset governance, right? This is, I mean, one of the things is that I'll talk about later that, whenever you are planning to roll out a enterprise architecture governance, there is some prerequisite. One of the prerequisite architecture asset, right? It should be already, established before you are establishing the method, because each time there is a solution architecture review, there will be a, those assets will be consumed by solution architecture for their, maybe, principal standards and policy. So that's why those assets should be, ready. So I think that's the, asset perspective why it is required. Now coming back to again, what are the stages or steps from a solution architecture asset governance perspective? So as you can see here, there is the engagement architecture, engage architecture, asset governance, evaluate architecture, asset governance, review architecture, asset governance, and then the publish architecture, asset governance. Now, if you look at the, engage architecture, asset governance, what are the things, right? What are the objectives? So it will help to review program-wide request for architectural decision, standard, policies, principles, and guidelines as captured in the architecture asset governance. Analyze architecture asset governance topic request and prioritize in the architecture asset governance plan. Assign a lead when the decision is made to initiate the architecture asset governance. Notify the participant serving in the capacity as the architecture asset governance team for the designated on the topic. So I think responsible, if we look at it, is a typical, architecture asset governance manager who will come and, responsible for that. And other participant will be definitely, there might be a requester, there might be a working group who will come over there. Now coming to the next part from evaluate architecture asset governance perspective. So now what are the objectives over here? So definitely one of the major objectives is to convene architecture asset governance group to review the architecture asset governance topic request from and refine as needed. Uh, Update the architecture asset governance topic plan to reflect agreed upon meeting states and milestones. Create a draft version of the, asset being developed, architecture decision, standard, policies, guidelines, using an asset template that can be shared with a, broad audience. Update the architecture asset governance topic summary with the outcomes of the evaluate architecture asset governance activities. So I think this is the, from a evaluate architecture asset governance perspective. Now coming to the review architecture assess, what the main objective is, conducting. Actually, you have to conduct a socialization and feedback process to review the draft asset, right? Whatever that's a very important when you do that review. You engage, you evaluate, you start reviewing now. Incorporate feedback which has been received as a part of the, draft asset. Upon socialization and feedback incorporation, perform a final review of the asset and create a final asset. Update the architecture asset governance with the topic summary with the outcomes of the review architecture asset governance activities. So this is the, review part from architecture asset governance perspective. And now coming to the last stage of in architecture asset governance, last important thing is that you have to publish it, right? The asset governance. Now, what are the things? How from publishing? What are the objectives? Right? You need to create a communication plan to inform stakeholders of the architecture decision, standard policy principles or guidance. Publish the final assets in an accessible channel. Right? It may be a EA repository. It may be maybe SharePoint you can start, initiate, and later on you can bring your e-repository tools, and where you can publish those assets in a accessible channel, and publish the architecture asset governance topic summary in an accessible channel, so which is again like your SharePoint, your repository Clarity. So I think this is uh, stages or or from asset architecture governance perspective, these are the steps which you need to follow. Uh, Two, this is for a, again, just to refrain that, not a refrain, just to rephrase that, it is still you are talking about from an enterprise architecture method. You have to gate review, initiate gate review, you have a solution architecture review, and then third is the architecture asset governance part of it. So when it comes to the roles and responsibility, so I think there is a, from a client aspect or your organization perspective, the chief information officer, or if there is a partner or agency which are involved in this, then that partner which will who will chair the architecture asset governance meetings and also act as the representative architecture review board. Now, from a requester aspect, which is definitely important, it may be a solution architect and the, because as I said initially that whatever assets were there, standard policies, blueprintings and all, so solution architect or solution review time, solution architect is in a major consuming, or the third party or agency which are there who is helping to develop the solution, so they are also consuming it. So I think they will be requesting, so that's what, and the responsibility to do for them, document the architectural asset governance required in coordination with the architecture asset governance manager. Architecture asset governance manager, who will actually responsibility will be like coordinates the agenda, publishing, minutes submitting. Architecture asset governance team which will come and assist the with the development of agenda items, assist the creation of standard policy guidelines, principle of the updates to the blueprint. Working group, it may be from your partner or third party agencies which are there from that, or maybe from your organization, sorry, from your client has already a stable environment, working groups. So working with the architecture asset governance to confirm standards, policies, and other assets. Change management, which is very important from architecture asset governance perspective. I think that's where they will to communicate the architecture asset governance decision on the monthly topics. Now there is a definitely a niche-based EA core team, enterprise architect core team who will be there, being a technology architect, initiative lead, or working group as necessary. What they will do is they prepare a technology assets or proposals for review and approval with the architecture, asset governance team. So I think if we look at, we started with the, just to rephrase that EA governance method, right? We started with this three thing, right? Uh, at a planning stage, it's the initiative gettings, the solution deliveries, the solution architecture reviews, and the architecture asset governance. I think these are, typical methods where you already set up a enterprise architecture governance. Then these steps needs to be followed as a part of, enterprise architecture governance method. And I just, kind of listed down based on the experience, based on the summary which I've seen from an enterprise architecture review, from solution architecture initiative. Actually, it's an initiative architecture review. The first stage, the solution architecture review, the architecture asset governance. These are the major activity summaries. Point of view. I'm not going to read it. I think this is all self-explanatory. And then the some of the template while doing that activity, which is important. I'll show you some of the template from an initiative gate review to from a solution architecture review to architecture asset governance perspective, right? Everything has some template inventory which you need to look at. Now, I think so. We till now we spoke about what are the things from a e-governance when you want to roll out? What are the activities? What the method to follow, right? Now coming to here, it's a more of a the implementation plan, right? If you remember, we talked about the implementation should be two-phased, right? First phase would be a more of an iterative, and second phase is a more of a stabilization phase, right? So now here we talked about from a your organization, from your client perspective, how do you do that implementation plan, right? First, the EA methods which you already shown till now, bring it a initial gating to solution delivery to asset. Now, implementation approach will to validate the EA governance methods in the areas of initiative, gating review, solution architecture review, architecture, asset governance. Updates to the methods will be made from the feedback and further EA template development and population of assets occurs during this phase. EA repository design and development of the EA repository, which is again from a EA governance implementation, is very important. Now, first thing is that from EA repository, you have to design and development uh, EA repository. Assumption is that this will be initially based on maybe SharePoint technology in the phase one. Later on, you can scope and bring a proper EA tools as a central repository, or it to as it will act as a EA governance tool. Now, third is the change management aspect, development of the formal training materials, skill metrics, communication content, and plan to support rollout expansion. So I think when you say that EA governance rollout, the implementation plan will definitely. These are the major components will look like for a to make a effective EA governance implementation plan. Now, this is again a very much illustrative part. The timelines and milestone perspective, EA governance implementation plan. It does not require, it will require exactly 6 months. It's based on all your, scopings, based on all your size of the organization, based on the agreement with the your client or your organizations, the 6 months. In general, my experience perspective, I just come to okay, phase one and will be the phase initial 4 months because that's the important thing, and the phase two, which is more of a stabilization, will be 2 months. So I think so. First thing is that EA methods, which I talk about the initiate, gating review, the solution architecture review, the asset governance, all these things, the EA method, you have to establish that. The EA repository where it could should confirm your structure. I will show you, how the purple EA repository, the structure look like. But one of the key thing is that you may start with the SharePoint, then slightly after that we'll move into some of the standard EA tools for EA repository. Then the change management aspect. Whenever there is these things, you will talk about EA method, EA method. You need to get some, develop some trainings, plans, materials. So that where change management will come, followed by entire, things has to be also a complementary by EA communications. So that's what implementing EA communication is important. Now stabilization perspective, I think it's a more of a solution architecture review expansions uh, based on your agencies or partners, and there will be an architecture review board pilot where there will be architecture asset governance deployment. Then there will be EA repository expansions, like to bring any tools over here. Then there will be a conduct and the internal architecture asset governance training, the conduct agency architecture governance training. So this is more or less illustrative view of how the milestone look like from a enterprise architecture governance phase one and phase two. I just wanted to give some plan. This is like an illustrative view. So if you look at the phase one, From a solution architecture review, readiness pilot aspect, I think these are the key activities. Pilot solution architecture review methods. You have to utilize all ESS targeted for solution architecture review readiness. So, yeah. So I'm not going to, read out it just a self-explanatory perspective. There is a all those things steps from a phase one. You need to confirm. Again, it is illustrative view. It is not required. It is more customizable based on your requirement and agreement with your client or your organizations. This is the phase two where we talked about the governance is more of a stabilization scenario. Once you set up the first thing, and then the stabilization phase two, it is more of a your expansion or implement repository tools, the architecture, asset governance deployment, the solution architecture review, governance expansion, and architecture review board pilot. So I think that's where governance you are actually so. But I mean, you talk about the EA method. You talk about I have looked into talked about the EA governance implementation plan, the rollout, and so on. Now I think while talking all those things, somewhere we have to think about a framework, right? Which is again a enterprise architecture governance framework. Why this governance framework? Because I need to stay healthy at my from a governance perspective, right? So which will help me to bring focus to the work of setting the IT organization with the key architecture governance process and tools. So effective IT architecture governance drives the adoption of EA principles in all IT decision. So I think this kind of based on all TOGA framework only all this uh, governance and management framework. So if you look at here, it's more of an architecture leadership plan. So where architecture governance bodies play a valuable role in managing the life cycle of technology, then ensuring the quality solution has been developed. The architecture metrics, which is very important. Whenever there is a governance has been set up, there will be some architecture metrics. For example, you want to review the performance of your you know yeah, assets, right? The blueprinting, the standards, all those things, right? So how many times in a year it has been reviewed or it has been referred? So I think, and then there will be so many areas where you can develop the metrics which will help to measure the performance. If there is a reinforce requires in terms of accountability, users, compliance, so that can also introduce from material. Architecture competency management is more or less, actively managing the skills and capacity which require as a part of the EA capability, enterprise architecture capability. The process is like use standards process to maintain the vitality and complex of standards, principles, policies, and reference architecture. And then architecture assess, I think we have been talking about that it is like a vision, principle, standards, policy, reference architectures. These are the something, while establishing the enterprise architecture governance at your organization, at your client set, something, to keep in mind, which will help to, you know, set up the architecture governance process. Just to tell that from while you talk about the EA governance, I mean, what are the prerequisite? I think one of the prerequisites I've been talking about the architecture asset. This is very important. I think from a, actually is a, in my view, this is a part of enterprise architecture governance only. So unless there is a principal standard policies reference architecture available, so your architecture governance, enterprise architecture governance is this is something not there, right? Maybe a council, enterprise architecture council can come and play a role, but when it comes to the enterprise architecture governance, I think as a part of the method that solution architecture review, they will consume that architecture assets, right? So unless it is there, so your EA governance is actually not fulfilled, right? So I think from a vision aspect, principle, standard, policies, architecture reference, all thing as a prerequisite, it should be there. Then the architecture, leadership, organization roles and responsibility perspective. I think to define the governance structure, the architecture governance communication structure, the ARB, the T charters, the valuable support, defines roles and responsibility. I think till the time I have talked about the EA methods, being it a initiate getting review, being it a solution architecture review, being it a architecture asset review. I talked about roles and responsibility, but overall there is a defined roles and responsibility as a part of the architecture governance. It is important to establish. So I mean this is from a prerequisite when you are planning for a enterprise architecture governance. And then just to give it some simplified view for like how the governance structure look like, it's a very simple way. So if you want to escalate anything, I think you have a architecture review board or you can have a EA counseling. Then parallelly you have solution architecture review, you have a architecture domain. So architecture domain is nothing but in app architecture, information technology architecture, security architecture, business architectures. These are architecture domain who will establish what the all the EA assets, right? Being it architecture principles, standards, policy, reference models, and all, and the who will consume it at the time of solution architecture review. And these assets who have been established by the architecture domain will be consumed. So I think from that aspect, these two things, solution architecture review and architecture, need a more close collaboration. So I think this is a one of the simplified view how this governance structure look like. And then if we look at further, one more view is like again, like there is architecture assets, who consume it, at what time. There is a IT planning stages, there is a project teams stages. So that things it consumes all those, they refer it. And who manages it? It is managed by the your domain architect, working groups and all. That's where the EA management review teams comes. And if there is escalation which needs to be you submit to the EA code teams. Uh, Again, solution architecture review also it is submit to the EA code teams. If there is a compliance, it refers to the architecture assets. And then again, from a time to time escalation perspective, architecture review board is there. If architecture review board is something unable, it can escalate to the leadership. This is again a very simplified view perspective. Just wanted to highlight that here the overall, suppose an enterprise architecture review board, what are the roles and responsibility, who will be the designated person as a part of the architecture review board, EA code teams, the EA management review team. Also, I think this is something as a part of roles and responsibility from EA governance, which is important. But I have not put, I have scoped it out here because this required a separate discussions. I'll come out in my next video. But at this moment, for this EA governance understanding point of view, how do you roll out? This is something I have kept out of scopes when defining the rules and responsibility. I think that's all I just wanted to talk about. When you think about the EA governance setting up, what is that you need to do from a rollout aspect? What the methods we need to follow, and then how that simplified view from a EA governance and the from a EA governance framework perspective. Yeah. So I think that's all from at this moment. And if there is I'll plan to come out the next roles and responsibility from a governance aspect. Thank you very much.